Good morning, Rev J. This community has decided to join you on a purpose to reveal and awaken the divinity within each and every one of them. They and all watching have committed to vibrating at the speed of the divine. They are gathered together today to be inspired by your words, your presence, your charisma, and your humor. No pressure. Your mission, Rev, should you decide to accept it. And of course, you are always at choice. Is, to paraphrase Richard Bach, show them that they can fly as fast as thought by beginning to know that they have already arrived. As always, should you be caught or killed, trip over your words or say something dumb, the universe will disavow any knowledge of your actions. This state will not self-destruct for 5 seconds. Our insurance won't cover that. But since we don't believe in luck, break a leg, married, toy, mazel tov. No. Have at it, Rev J.
So why do we exist? Why are we here? How are we going to do all this? That's just a few simple questions I want to ask you today. It's nothing big, don't get scared. But I've been wondering that. I've been wondering that since I decided to talk about our mission statement today. The Dalai Lama said, I believe that the very purpose of life is to be happy. And those who know Thomas Troward said that as well. Dalai Lama goes on and says, from the very core of our being, we desire contentment. Since we are not solely material creatures, it is a mistake to place all our hopes for happiness on external development alone. The key is to develop inner peace. The key is to develop inner peace. And the purpose, is that what he said? The purpose of life is to be happy. But then I was reading Ralph Waldo Emerson, who you may know, his birthday was Saturday, who's one of our New Thought influencers, as they call them. He said, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. To make a difference that you have lived and lived well. So like I said, I'm not here really to discuss the meaning of life. I want to talk about our mission statement. And I want to show you in the long version of the mission statement, which you said in the affirmation, which Jamie talked about a little bit, that they could be one and the same. So here it is again, our mission statement. To use the principles and tools of the science of mind and spirit, new thought, neuroscience, and ancient wisdom to bust through, soar, and zoom into our greatest life, and sharing that gift for and with the common good. So today I want to break that down a little bit. So we'll start with to use the principles and tools of science of mind and spirit. Now, Science of Mind and Spirit is the original title for the Science of Mind book, which in this philosophy is a lot of times called the textbook, because it's like a textbook in a lot of ways. It's long, and it's deep, and it has exercises, everything that you had all your life in school. It's a textbook. But the important thing about it, and maybe the most important thing about it, to bring that whole book down into 1, 2, 3, 4 words, is it teaches us how to think. not what to think, teaches us how to think. It also talks about to use the principle and tools of new thought. So what do we do at this center? You've already been witness to that, and anybody who's seen me speak before is witness to that. What does the Unity folk think? What does the divine science folk think? What do the various authors think? Marianne, Wayne Dyer, on and on and on. What do they think? We're going to bring that into here. What new thought, or versions of new thought, not everybody will call them new thought, call themselves new thought, but what does that bring to the party here that we're having, each and every one of us in our individual way? To use the principles and tools of neuroscience. Now the great thing about neuroscience as you read it, for anybody who likes to read it, and there are some books that make it less scientific and more palpable. Dr. Joe Dispenza helps do that in his books. But the great thing is that the science, the neuroscience, is starting to unify the science of how the brain works with the science of consciousness. And when you read that, and I usually put it up in in my blog or in my New Thought Guy Facebook page, when I see an article that talks about science discovering things that we've already known in the spiritual living world, I always put that up. Look, science has caught up with us. Because science obviously needs to feel it in a that kind of way. And when they do, and sometimes it's because they have to invent machines that will quantify it, then they come up with this big thing like they've already discovered it, but we've all known it for years and people before us. Oscar Wilde said the aim of life is self-development, to realize one's nature perfectly. And neuroscience teaches us how powerfully our thinking works, what happens when we think. You know, you have up to 60, 70,000 thoughts a day. Sit down and count them one time. Some of us have as much as 12,000, and some of us have less, unfortunately. Unfortunately, some of them are in government. 98%, now, where they got this statistic, I don't know, but it was a scientific statistic. 98% of the thoughts we think, the 60, 70,000 thoughts we think, 98% of them are the same thoughts we thought yesterday.
Oh my.
And 80% of those thoughts are negative. That we allow that negativity to repeat itself over and over and over again. And then we're surprised when lousy things show up in our lives. Now the great thing is this thing called neuroplasticity. I said it right. Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says, it tells us that the neural pathways and the synapses that are snap, crackling, and popping up there in your brain can change, can adapt based on your behavior, based on your thoughts and feelings, based on your environment. They snap, crackle, and pop differently when you first get in here, when we're in a spiritual mind treatment, when you hear the song, when you listen to me, when you chat with each other. Things are just snap, crackling, and popping differently. Could be positive, could be negative. In our own minds, it's not positive or negative according to the brain. The brain doesn't care. It's like the law doesn't care. And daily, the brain engages in synaptic pruning, they call that. It's funny when Patty and I, well, mostly Patty, does some gardening. I always have a little when she prunes certain plants to train them or to make them not take over other parts of the garden. And that's always a little, but it's actually a good thing, I learned. Well, that happens in our brain. When we change our thoughts and our feelings, especially intentionally, those synapses change. And as we do that consistently, now some studies will say 21 days, some studies will say 90 days, I've even heard 120 days. Once we do that consistently, that goes into our beliefs. Because now you've created this new synapse that floats around and affects everything else. Thoughts become the pathway to beliefs, and then vice versa. Beliefs filter and inspire thoughts, and then thoughts filter and inspire beliefs, but it all begins with one idea, one thought. Mahatma Gandhi said, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. So neuroscience, which we'll talk about and we'll bring up now and again, or I'll bring up now and again, is the path to your destiny, is that physical path. Your mind influences your brain, which influences the rest of the part of your body. Also, part of this is to use the principles and tools of ancient wisdom. Albert Einstein said, all religions, arts, and sciences are branches of the same tree. All these aspirations are directed toward ennobling man's life, lifting it from the sphere of mere physical existence, and leading the individual towards freedom. So we're going to talk about sometimes, what does the Torah say? What does the New Testament say? What does the Upanishads say? What does the Buddha say? What does the Vedics say? The Quran, what does it say? When we light the flames of faith, we're not only mentioning their tenets, but their mission. That's their mission, is to have people live a life of compassion and unity and justice, or to have a life of the Christ consciousness actively working and intentionally working within each and every one of them. Scripture seems to tell us what to think a lot. And I have found that when I look deeper into Scripture, I don't bring up too much Scripture here, and probably won't. It's not usually my thing, but when I've spoken at Unity churches, they like their Scripture. Unity folk like some Bible. So, okay, fine, I'll go look for quotes in the Bible that help bring my point. But it's interesting when I go looking at the Bible, and usually I use a translation that comes from the original Aramaic, and not through the Greek or even the Hebrew. The Aramaic is kind of like the colloquial vernacular of Hebrew, like the everyday talking of Hebrew. I usually go from the Aramaic and use a gentleman who knows the culture of the times and knows the history of the times, so that when he writes a translation, it's based on what his knowledge of what those people thought and did and what the rituals were of the time. So it's not just, this word equals that word. But when I use Scripture, like I said, I dig deeper because I find that without the religious jargon, without the stuff that we all heard by some of the clergy that are a little twisted, and they find their own reasons and twist that reasoning around. When I get past that and look at the story and what the story is talking about, I get a deeper meaning of what's going on. It's about stories, and not necessarily tales that really happen. I find that when I use Scripture, it reminds me of especially how it's been translated, how it's talked about over these thousands of years that it's been used, a couple thousand years that it's been used, that it's not perfect like we are. Some of the ideas in there are downright dumb. And some of the ideas we don't even talk about anymore because they were of that time and they are of that culture. And just like some of the ideas that we have in our minds, we slip them away. We know that they are, BS. So we don't listen to them anymore. We don't even talk about them anymore. There's A woman, her name is Debbie Barbuto, and she calls herself Mommy Moo Moo. She writes children's books, and she said, we have a choice to live in the age of enlightenment or the age of darkness. And when we use scripture or any scriptures, I'm not just talking about the Bible that we all know about, I'm talking about the Vedics, the Upanishads, the Tao, what people say now, what people said, at the turn of the century and then in the 1800s, which we always use a lot of their quotes and stuff. Is this quote part of the age of enlightenment, or is this something that brings us back into the age of darkness? Because that's not what we're doing around here anymore. We're not doing that age of darkness anymore. There's no darkness. I know there's a shadow. There's all that shadow psychological stuff. And we'll talk about that sometime too. But it's an age of enlightenment. We need to enlighten ourselves every day, every moment. And we'll have tools, and we'll get tools to do that. So these are only guides, all these scriptures, all these people. It's really what you say is going on. Not what I say, not what the scriptures say, not what neuroscience says, not any of that. It's what you say is going on in your life. It's what your mission is in your life. So what is your mission? Well, I found these, it's called the 6 Human Needs. And it's something that Anthony Robbins came up with after years of dealing with people and talking to people smarter than him. And he came up with these 6 human needs, and they are this. 1, certainty. Certainty is assurance you can avoid pain and gain pleasure in your life. Another need is uncertainty or variety. Need for the unknown, change, new stimuli in our lives. Significance. Some people have a big need for significance. They want to feel unique, they want to feel important, they want to feel special, they want to feel needed. And some people are primarily living a life of that need. Connection and love, a strong feeling of closeness or union with someone or an organization, something, or a community of people. Growth and expansion of capacity, capability, or understanding. That's why you come here. That's why you take classes. That's why you read certain books. That's even why you go to certain concerts versus other concerts, because you grow. Even if you go to a concert and just sit there and enjoy the music and there's no lyrics maybe, it's just music, you grow by that enjoyment, by bringing that happiness into your life. And the 6th one is contribution, a sense of service and focus on helping, giving, and supporting others. And that's what brought me here, to be of service. Because I was finding that my talents, in a way, were being of service in the entertainment world, but they weren't being of, I didn't feel I was being of service. Just being being an entertainer wasn't enough. I've had 1,000 people, applaud for me for something, and that's nice. But when the 12 of you or other people of other sizes have, it's not necessarily the applause, it's an energy that you feel from people getting what you're talking about. It was 1,000,000 times more fulfilling for me. So being of service, I found, is really what I wanted to do. So whatever is your main driver, and you can sit and figure that out. And then there'll be levels of each one. Certainty, you like a lot of variety, you always want to be significant, you're always heartfelt. Some people are just so heartfelt. Growth, you're always looking for ways to grow, and or maybe you're living a life of contribution. Whatever is your main driver, you get to decide what that is. But remember that your mission in this driver is like the centers. To bust through old thinking habits, whatever those are, to soar into new perspectives, attitudes, and consciousness, and to zoom into your best life. There's a gentleman who wrote a funny little book called The Dead Toad Scrolls. He was an attorney of some sort, decided he didn't want to be an attorney anymore because he felt he wanted to give more of a contribution than to defend people. So he wrote this huge book, evidently. I only read bits and pieces, called The Dead Toad Scrolls. His name, I don't think this is his real name, is Kilroy J. Oldster.
Yeah.
I think, like Thomas Troward, he wrote his fun philosophy stuff later in his life, although I wouldn't call Thomas Troward fun. But Kilroy said, the greatest fear that human beings experience is not death, which is inevitable, but consideration of the distinct possibility of living a worthless life. Now this month, our theme, even though I didn't describe it that way, our theme was, and so it begins, because we began this community. And in the first week, we talked about the Big Bang and the origins and how similar they are, and that all of us are part of a singularity, an energy, an idea that the universe had and created out with its intelligence and expressed itself individually, even as metal. Then we talked about the divine feminine and the women of new thought and how that collided and how that divine feminine is actually in each and every one of us. And I brought that out by reading many passages from the women of new thought who pretty much created a lot of the philosophy that Ernest Holmes wrote, that the science of mind is, that the divine science is. In fact, divine science was created by two women, and the unity was created by a married couple. So in that case, obviously, there was a one woman. And it was on Mother's Day, so we talked about the divine feminine on Mother's Day, and that we all reside in this new thought, in this divine feminine. Then we talked about our purpose statement, revealing and awakening the divine in you. And we talked about that that's always at work, and that's always there, that's always waiting. Reveal doesn't mean it's never there. It's already there. It's as we're revealing, and now we're also going to use awakening, because sometimes that's a little better to use. And I reminded and told you all that all of these are the word divine, or like namaste means the divinity in me sees the divinity in you, in different languages. And some of them are actually phrases. So we talked about that. We talked about our vision statement, which is on this side this week. We talked about our vision statement vibrating at the speed of the divine, and that it's actually more than a vision statement. I use the word vision statement because that's the common word, vision, mission, and purpose. But it's actually an envisioning statement. And what I talked about is that vision has not anything to do with eyesight, it has to do with insight, which is mostly here in the heart mind, in the heart brain. And now our mission statement: bust through, soar, and zoom. To fly as fast as thought, you must begin by knowing that you have already arrived, says Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Seneca said, it is not that we have so little time, but that we lose so much. The life we receive is not short, but we make it so. We are not ill-provided, but use what we have wastefully. Don't waste it, basically I'm saying. Our mission is to not waste it. And we don't waste it by taking the tools that we'll talk about here every week. Learn, relearn, rediscover. In fact, our theme next month will be rediscovering. Not discovering, rediscovering. I'm not going to bring things in those 5 weeks that are anything that you don't really know somewhere or have heard somewhere. But we need to constantly, and I do too, rediscover doing this. Rediscover awakening and revealing this. Rediscover that we have the power to bust through SOAR and ZOOM no matter what shows up in our lives. We want to reawaken it in our hearts, in our minds, and our gut, using insight, not eyesight. With that, we live our best lives. And we have to know, and we have to remember that it can come in stages. And sometimes it could take a minute, a second, sometimes it could take a month, a year, 2 years. But it's amazing when an idea shows up in your life. If you sit and you think about it, you go, oh my gosh, I've had this idea, and I've wanted this, and I've worked on it. Yeah, off and on, but I've worked on it for 2 years, and here it is. Here it is. It shows up. Here it is. They show up. That happens in all of our lives. And we can make it happen faster. It depends on how deep we get into our belief, but what we do is we take our ideas and the ideas that get in our way, and we bust through those ideas that get in our way. And we'll talk about different tools on how to do that. Spiritual mind treatment, meditation, visualizing, all kinds of tools. To bust through the junk, the crap that we've allowed to sit in our minds and in our brains for a long time. I have them too. I work through them too, and then I bust through. And when I bust through, then I can soar. And once I start soaring, I know I can zoom into whatever that idea that I decided is going to happen in my life happen. Because I know the law is behind me, is just sitting there going, here, do this, do that. And if I sit and listen and I breathe, then I hear it. Do this, take this action, and then when you're done with that, take that action. Now take this action, and the universe will make the rest show up. And that's what that means. That's our mission. That, my friends, doing this mission, and sharing. See, once you do that, you almost don't have a choice but to share your good fortune with other people. And you can do it in time, talent, and treasure. But you'll share your good fortune because you'll want to. And you'll share your good fortune because you'll be an example to others. Why is it that Barbara gets these great jobs? She's no smarter than me. She doesn't have a resume better than me, but she gets these great jobs. Why? Because her consciousness is there. Maybe it wasn't there yesterday, but it's there today. So she's bust through what wasn't there yesterday, and she's soaring, and now she's going to zoom because the universe is behind her. That, my friends, living this exampled life, and then giving your time, talent, and treasure to others, to the common good. That, my friends, is a life worth living. Namaste.